The human figure is one of the most enduring themes in the visual arts, so it makes a lot of sense for us to cover it early. Figure drawing is essentially the drawing of the human form in any of its various poses and shapes. It doesn't matter whether you're using Photoshop or a good old pencil to practice, everything we'll be covering in this class can apply to any drawing media. The first class on figure drawing will focus on the naked body. So we'll start by learning about the lines of action and then how to construct a rough human silhouette, or you can also call it a mannequin or skeleton. We'll also learn about proportions and the various elements you should keep in mind when drawing the human figure from life, from photos, and then hopefully from imagination. We'll start with the naked figure for the simple reason that it is easier to see the shapes of the body this way compared to a fully dressed figure, although we'll cover that later as well. And it's good to tackle figure/gesture drawing without the full knowledge of the anatomy behind it. The more questions that you have, the more questions that arise from the process, the more effective the anatomy class will be as far as your ability to remember it. Figure drawing is a skill artists of any level should constantly practice, so it really doesn't matter if you've never done it or if you're doing it on a regular basis. Hopefully this class should give you the tool to make the most out of your next session. A couple things to keep in mind here going into this class. Gesture drawing / figure drawing is, well, it's not the same thing. I'll explain the difference later, but gesture / figure drawing is something that mature artists practice routinely. It's like a muscle. You have to constantly practice it to keep it up to date, to keep it fresh in your memory. So this is something that professional artists do on a regular basis. Also, gesture drawing can be actually quite a beautiful piece of art on its own. So it's not just practice that can end in your portfolio as is. You don't have to push it further. And then gesture drawing can also be used as a warm-up. And not only can it be used as a warm-up, but it's actually something that a lot of people do just to get in the mood of drawing, or even if you're not in the mood, to kind of break this bad spell. It's really, really good exercise to just get back into drawing and then get the engine started. And lastly, gesture drawing is just good for active thinking. So theories that we'll use throughout the entire art school course, where you have to break everything down to its simplest element, and then you rebuild it from there. So just like we'll start with really, really rough shapes when it comes to gesture drawing to figure drawing, we'll do the same for everything else. For anatomy, we'll do the same for perspective, for colors. Everything else is going to be approached in the same way. So we start in a very, very rough, sketchy way, and then you build on this rough sketch and then add more and more detail as you go. Alright, we have a lot of stuff to cover in here, so let's get started. The line of action is the first thing we'll cover when it comes to figure drawing, for one simple reason, being that it's the first line that you'll ever put down on your sheet of paper or your canvas. This applies whether you're working from life or from imagination. So you can think of the action line as an imaginary line running down the spine of your model. So going from the neck all the way down to the tailbone. You can think of that line as a way to gauge how much expression or dynamism your pose is going to have. The stronger the curve, the more aggressive your pose will be. The straighter it is, the more static your pose is going to be. When you're drawing from life or even from a photo reference, you should always start with the line of action. Quickly, look at the character or the person and draw that line first. You should be able to spot it within the first 2 or 3 seconds from looking at the reference. And sometimes I'll also exaggerate the line a little bit or the curve to make the pose feel less stiff. So there are different ways to make lines of actions. There are good ways and then there are bad ways. So the main thing to remember is that it should only be one line with one curve, if there's a curve at all, which normally speaking there should be. So one thing one thing that you do not want to do is an S shape for your curve or your line of action. Your line of action should be just a straight curve, not a straight curve, but one line with one curve. That's it. No like squiggles like this, or no S's, or no, like this would be a bad one, for example. So it shouldn't be wavy like this. It should be just one line. Obviously the spine is from the side is something like this. So the spine itself is an S curve, but when you do the line of action, what you want to do is take the top of it, like the the base of the neck, and then the tailbone, and kind of do just one nice curve to blend that instead, to average this S curve into one single curve. The reason we focus on the line of action first is because it's the simplest representation of the gesture or the pose of your figure. The process will always be to start with something simple and build onto it, adding more and more details as you go. Once you have the line of action, it's a lot simpler to just attach to it the torso, the head, and the pelvis, and eventually everything else, including the limbs. And this is a much better way than trying to do those from the start. So again, we start super simple, we try to find this line of action, and then we'll attach the rest to it. So this will be kind of like the main guide that we have. So again, very quickly go over, and then here, especially when you see the back of the model, it's a lot easier because you can actually trace, the spine. There you go, something like this. And there are, as you can see here, poses that are more dynamic tend to have a much more pronounced curve, as opposed to poses that are more static, like this one here, where it's almost like a straight line. Then if you want to be a little bit more technical as to how to place those curves, those lines of actions, well, what I recommend is to use two dots. So one at the base of the neck here. So if you reach behind your neck and you try to feel kind of like the bones, now try to feel your spine. Those would be where that dot would go. So right behind your neck, at the base of your neck, and then the other one would go at the kind of like the underwear or the pants line right here. So if you're wearing kind of like underwear, it would look something like this. And that second dot would go right here, right in the middle. And then essentially what you look at is you look at the direction of the torso. Where is it bending? Is it bending this way? Is it bending the other way? Or is it a straight line? Straight lines should be pretty rare in most cases. So what you want to do when you can see kind of like the direction of the torso is just connect those two dots. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And then of course, like I said, the more curve you get, the more gesture you'll have, the more dynamism you'll have in your pose. Again, this one very simple here. You can actually see the spine, so two dots and then you connect them. There we go. And then when you look at a character or a reference from the front here, it's a little bit tricky because you can't really place those dots right on the image. But you can kind of imagine here it's behind the neck, so we'll place a dot here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just kind of like a way to give us some sort of a guide, an idea where that line would start and end. And here that would be kind of like in the middle, right where those underwear kind of like go in the back. So something around here. And then again, you look at the general direction of the torso. This one's not a straight line, but it's just very slight curve, like not much dynamism to this pose, but there is still a slight curve. So it will be maybe something like this. And same idea here. If you don't see it quite well, kind of just place it at the base of the neck, right here. Kind of try to imagine where the tailbone would be, somewhere around here. And then look at the general direction, of the body. It's not a straight line. It's not like this. It's a little bit more like this. So that would be the line of action. Now I've been drawing a single line of action, but you could very well add a second one and even more to those. So let's say, in this case here, the line of action is so easy because the actual pose is almost like a line of action, a perfect line of action. But let's say you have something here, like this example here is a good one where you have kind of different lines of action going on in this pose. So you have this one here, obviously, but then there's the leg also. That's a big element of the pose. So you might want to add another one for this one. So it could be something like this, you know, a different line of action. Same here for the leg. So some poses you might want to have extra ones, or for the arms, like this one here. And again, it's the same principle. Kind of just look at the overall shape of the body parts, and you know, don't go like this and like this. You know, that's not what we're trying to do. We don't want any broken lines like this. We want a nice smooth curve in one go. So something like this. Something that just very, very simply shows the general direction of the pose. Alright, now that we have established the line of action, you're ready to place the three major ovals or rectangles of the body, and those would be the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. Once again, those are supposed to be super quick, and it shouldn't take you more than like 5 to 10 seconds to identify and draw them. So what we're doing here is building a super simple skeleton or mannequin. So eventually we'll add in the legs and the arms, but this is an essential step before we get to that point. And it's also very essential if you're going to draw from imagination at some point. There are obviously many ways to create that skeleton, but the method I'm showing you now is the one that's helped me the most, and the one that has the most flexibility, and more importantly, the one that is simplest to draw, which makes this a really good starting point for pretty much anybody. So we're going to be working with circles, ovals, you know, straight lines, not straight lines, but lines, and potentially rectangles. So this makes it, you know, something that anybody can do. So looking at a reference like this, or looking at a live model, a lot of people, you know, if they were to simplify the body, they would probably do like something like this, kind of like one big shape for the torso, and then add the legs, and then add the arms with the hands and the head. The one problem with this, and let's say we drop down the opacity here so that we can see it a little bit better. The only problem with this is that it's a lot more tricky to have any kind of rotation along the axis, along the line of action. So we're going to draw the line of action here, as I didn't. It's a lot harder to create a rotation this way or that way if this is just one big chunk. So when you have two separate pieces this way, so this one can rotate that way or that way, and this one is also independent and it can rotate this way and this way. So this way here allows you for a lot more flexibility when drawing figures. So don't have the line of action here, but something like this. So yeah, so this is the way to go. This is what you want to be doing. The other way to do it, instead of doing ovals, if you're more comfortable with doing squares, you can totally do that instead. So we're going to start as usual with the line of action, like this, and then we're going to add boxes that represent the envelope, the different parts of the body. So in my case, I kind of prefer squares, just for one simple reason, is that it gives the head more of a clear direction. So you know, you should always orient the box around it based on the line of the eyes. So you know, let's say in this case here, my eye line is like this, so the box would be something like this, and then everything is parallel, so this line parallel to this one and to this one, and then you just, you know, you create a rectangle out of it. Same here, so the line for my eyes is there's an eye here, just draw kind of like this line here, something like this, and then the box for it would be again something like this, with parallel lines. So it makes it a lot simpler to draw the hair, to draw the head in the correct angle. So that's why I like to draw squares or rectangles for the face, for the head. But yeah, you can do the same thing with the rest of the rib cage. So when you're drawing rectangles, it's actually a little bit easier. So if you're just starting, and if you've never done this before, that's what I would recommend over ovals, because it allows you to check your pose a little bit better when you have a nice line of action. So with my line of action here, and again I said this is the first thing that you want to do because this will direct everything else. So once you have that, and you want to trace, let's say, the next part, so the rib cage, what you do is you take the rib cage. The rib cage will start somewhere around here, around the clavicles. So we can do a quick mark here, and then it'll end where you see again this kind of cut here, or where you see the ribs actually going this way. So the line would be somewhere around here. So this would be kind of like the boundaries of my box. So with your two dots like this, you can trace a line that connects them, so a straight line, so that you're able to create, the box around it more accurately. So something like this. There we go. So that would be my pelvis. Not my pelvis. That would be my rib cage. And then you can do the same thing with the pelvis. So again, the line for the pelvis is about here, and then at the bottom. So this line here is pretty straight, but I'm going to draw it again still, just to make it really, really nice straight line. And then we're going to go to the edge here, and then same distance on the other side, and join those lines to create a nice clean rectangle. And that would be kind of like an accurate skeleton, following the line of action as closely as possible. So this method here works really well for models that are standing. For reference, when it is a standing pose, when you have any kind of foreshortening, so whenever, like in this case here, where the leg, is going in the distance and then back. So obviously, this is not the real length of the leg. It's this short because it's in perspective. It's foreshortened. When you have that, those boxes and then those ovals not going to work that great, so we'll have to take that into consideration too, but we'll cover that a little bit later. Right now, just be aware that to draw a skeleton like this accurately, for it to work, the model needs to be standing. But of course, if you have the model like in a ball or sitting down and things like that, like more complex poses, that's not going to work quite as well. But we're just starting, so we're going to go and we're going to go ahead and use a simple skeleton first. And then of course, the next step would be something like, instead of drawing just squares, we draw cubes, so that we can place them in space a little bit more accurately. Or cubes, or spheres, but with lines on them, so that we know how they are oriented. So, but this is going to be a little bit later. Right now, what we want to focus on, knowing the limitations of this kind of skeleton and working with simple-ish poses, we want to be able to draw the skeleton here from scratch, really quickly onto our characters, to be able to, when we look at a reference, to be able to recreate that on paper first, and then actually add more of the details. So this is very useful to get the general pose, the general pose of the character. So this is something that you should be able to do on your own. If you want to do spheres or whatever, that works too. But this is what you need to be able to do. And then from there, in the next step, we'll add the arms and the legs. Most of the mobile bones in the body attach to one another in a series of balls and socket joints, around which they can pivot and rotate. So it looks something like this. You have the bone here. This one will be kind of like the receiving bone, and then the other one. So this would be the ball, and this would be the socket here. And this is how you can rotate You can rotate like this in a lot of different directions, and that's kind of how the bones in the body are made. So there are a few ones here when it comes to drawing skeletons or mannequins that are pretty important. So we'll look at those right now. So the first ones that I always like to draw, the ones I like to draw first are the ones for the shoulders. So depending if you're drawing a box or an oval for your rib cage, the position is going to be a little bit different. But essentially, the ones that we're looking at are the shoulder sockets here, and then this one can be anywhere around the corner of that square, which is why another reason why I like squares, because it makes it really easy to spot where the shoulder should be. It's like pretty much at the end of that box, and then it can be either like this or right here or right here. Like it can rotate around this one point here, so the ball can be anywhere around the corner of that rectangle, and then in this case it would probably be something like higher this way. And then same here, so we'd have the joint for the shoulder, and we don't see the other one. So a joint for the shoulders, the shoulder joints, very, very important. Next, we have the elbow and the wrist. So the way I do those, and to look at an image like this, those are also kind of like the things that you should spot as soon as possible. So right after the line of action, right after your three main shapes here, the head, the pelvis, and the torso or the rib cage, you should spot the joints of your body. So shoulders, elbow, wrists. There you go. So now you have the pose for your hand. Again here, the elbow and the wrist down behind the hair. Now the next one is the hip socket. So that's a bit of a tricky one because it's not as visible as the other joints because it's deep under the skin and under the muscle. But a way to do this, and of course in this case we're going to simplify it a lot to keep it simple, and we're going to treat male and female exactly the same way, although it is not quite the same in reality, as everybody knows. But for this particular character, this particular skeleton, this one is going to be unisex, so there's not going to be anything particular between the male and the female. So we're going to place the joints for the hip sockets right on the edge of that box here, that pelvis box. So not at the corner, not all the way down, just a little bit up. So not at the midpoint, below that, slightly below that. And then of course both of these should be at the same spot on that on that square, on that rectangle. So you don't want one of the ball to be all the way up here, or ball to be a little bit lower than the other side. So this should always be on the same side, on the same level. And then if you're drawing circles instead, kind of like the same deal. So whatever you have, we can't really see it from the side here, but let's say we draw it this way here. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw the pelvis oval. So if you prefer to do that instead, what you can do is once you have your oval like this and your line of action, to place the hip socket, you take kind of like the outside of this oval, and then right in that triangle right here, when it starts to curve back, you can place your hip joints. Alright, so not at the complete end of that oval, but slightly below, just slightly below, something like this. And then from there, well, it's a lot more simple. So you have the knees, and the joint for the knees, we're going to place it starting at the bottom of the knee. So not at the top here, not right here. The joint is going to start at the very bottom of the knee. So this way and this way here. Yeah, something like this. And then the last one, the ankle, right here. So once you have that, just connect the dots and using straight lines, and then that would be all the joints that you need to really worry about. And then of course here you can start to see how this gives us some really nice reference points to measure things when it comes to time to draw this from life or from reference, without drawing over an existing photo this way. So you can see here, if you're not too sure about this perspective here, like how to treat the fact that this leg seems shorter compared to this one here. Now you have some nice reference. Okay, so the length all the way down to the knee is about the same size. So this distance here and this distance here, that's pretty similar. The way where it starts to change is at the knee down. So this is the portion of the leg that's in perspective. The rest wasn't really. So that's kind of just, now what you can do is look at the distance between here and here, look at the distance between here and here, and be like, okay, so this one needs to be a little bit longer, this one needs to be a little bit shorter for this to work. But anyway, so the whole point of having all these joints drawn onto the body is to be able to do your own skeletons like I did before. So now we have the head, now we have the rib cage, we have our pelvis, and we're going to place the joints here. So imagine this is a square or a rectangle. This is the same idea. So if you have, I'm placing them essentially the same spot as this if I were drawing a box. So if you draw a box around this rectangle here, that's where, right on the corner, that's where the those joints would be. So imagine that you have a box when you're drawing the joints. In this case, I'm not drawing the actual box, which is why they seem like they're floating, but they're not. They're just based on the fact that there would be a box around this. Same thing with this here. So imagine that you have a box around the pelvis, and then those joints would be right on the outside here, slightly down from the midsection of the pelvis oval. So right about here. And then again, to keep it simple, just this should be kind of like a rectangle, this whole thing, like the shoulders and the pelvis joints. This should all be about at the same place. Obviously, if you're a male or female, the distance of the shoulder joints might differ, the distance of the hip joint might differ. But for this case, to keep it simple and to practice, let's all keep it at the same distance. So this the same distance as this. So super simple. And then from there, as we've seen, we just draw the elbows. So quickly looking at the elbow, where this elbow ends, as opposed to the pelvis oval here. The wrist almost like at the same level as the hip joints, right? So we're gonna do that for this particular skeleton. So the wrist is about right here. And then that would mean that the elbow is right in the middle, because this distance to this distance to this distance, pretty similar. So to keep it simple, again, it's not accurate, and we're going to look into it in more details later. But to keep it simple, when you're drawing a quick sketch, and when you're drawing when you're drawing a gesture sketch, to keep it simple, to pose your character, quickly on the page, just think of it this way. So you draw a line like this. And at the midpoint, like right in the middle, that would be where the elbow is. Not quite. Normally the elbow is a little bit lower than that, but to keep it simple, you can place it right in the middle. And then you have the hands after that. And then the legs, you can imagine the head, the distance, what the distance between this and the pelvis, double that. And so you have the distance here, all the way down to the pelvis joints, and then you double that again all the way down, and that would be where the feet would be. So the ankle joints, they would be right down here, and then again you can draw a nice straight line right in the center of that. You have your knees, and then there you go, you would have a nice skeleton. So of course you have the line of action, which is, it's not much action for this one since it's standing straight. But those would be kind of like your super, very, very simplified proportions, so that you can remember those easily. All right. So everything is kind of like either cut in half or a double of something else. So very, very simple. Again, we're going to look into those into more details. There's different ways to approach the proportions of the body. So we're going to look at those, obviously, but right now, to practice, practice working on this simple skeleton right now. This is really a good starting point. And then try practicing drawing this onto different photos, depending, regardless of the photo. Just, start again with the line of action, the head, rib cage, pelvis, and then draw those joints where they should be. Not where they should be, but if you're working on a photo, where they actually are. So don't think too much, just draw what you see. Here, the hips right here, the knee. And practice doing this. Be really good at spotting those. So the more you do it, the more you'll be, the faster you'll be able to spot those when you look at a character like this. Not a character, but a photo of a person like this. And then this is the first step, the very first step to doing any kind of figure drawing. So you need to be able to spot those landmarks on the body, and be able to recreate them and know where they are, know what to look for, first, and then from there we can add the details. What I like to call this little guy here is kind of like an upgraded stick figure. This is a really good starting point, like I've been saying. But this one, this evolved stick figure has a major flaw, and we can see it in a different pose. So something like this one here. So for most poses where the character is standing and where the limbs are kind of like, bent in a way where they're not foreshortened, where there's no perspective of any sort. Like in this case, this length here from here to here, then from here to here to here. Those distances all the same because there's no perspective really going on in this pose. But when you have something like this here, or this character where we draw the line of action and then we draw all the other components of a skeleton. Alright, so now, we look at it this way. Alright, that's, that kind of works. But then what happens if this disappears? Now, you look at this character here, and suddenly it's really not clear what is in front. So is this leg here coming towards us, or is it going away from us? Where is this knee? Is this knee in front of this knee, or is it further back in the image, in the photo? Same with this hand here. What's going on with this hand? Why is this distance here so short compared to this one? Is the elbow out, closer to the camera, or is it in, as it actually is in this pose? So you can't really tell from this skeleton. So the main problem with this one is that, while it's really good for characters that are standing in like very simple poses where there's not much perspective going on, it really doesn't work the second that the character is in a complicated pose, or a pose that has any sort of perspective, or any limbs or any part of the body that is foreshortened. So to remedy to this problem, there is obviously a way. And instead of having those lines here and those dots that really don't place the limbs properly in space, there's a way to actually achieve that with a simple skeleton, and that would be with creating cylinders instead of straight lines and dots. So while this here is not really easy to tell in which direction this is going and how it's placed in the space. When you have cylinders, now suddenly it becomes a lot easier. So let's say, for this one here, we have a cylinder going like this, and we can see the top of the cylinder here because the cylinder is pointing away from us. And then we have another cylinder coming slightly towards us instead. Now, when you look at this, now suddenly you understand how this is placed in space a lot more than with just the line itself. So in the next chapter, this is what we'll be focusing on. Okay, like we saw in the previous chapter, when it comes to positioning a figure in space and in complicated poses and in perspective, the little skeleton, the little mannequin that we created here doesn't quite cut it. So it's great for any kind of pose that's, you know, standing up when there's no or when there is minimal perspective going on and no foreshortening of any kind. But the second you go and have and encounter a situation like where was it? Like this one here, where clearly, you know, this distance here is much shorter than this distance here, because this arm here, this portion of the arm is obviously in like a pretty intense perspective in comparison to the other one, then we have a problem. And to solve that problem, we can start looking at cylinders instead of straight lines and dots. The idea here is just to give us the direction of the limb, to give us an idea of what the limb and what the different parts of the body look like in space. Because with lines only, lines and dots, we can't do that. So this brings me to this little drawing here. So we're going to look at how to create cylinders, how to build cylinders, and how to manipulate them in space and be able to draw them in any angle that we want. So this is the initial challenge before we can move on. So of course, if you're used to perspective and if you're used to drawing things in perspective, this is not going to be too challenging. But for those who can't, this is a really important part. So here we go. Now, of course, perspective has to do with the position of the viewer all the time. So wherever you are as a person looking at another object, it really has a big impact on the actual thing that you're going to see. So if you, let's say, if you're really short and you're looking at a table, it's very likely that you'll see under the table. If you look up and you see, the under part of the table. But if you're really tall, you might see over the table. So you might see what's on the table and not what's underneath. If you're at a height where at eye level, you're just as tall as the table, then you'll just see kind of like the side of the table. You're not going to be able to see on top of it, and you're not going to be able to see below it. So this is kind of the idea here. If you're at eye level with a cylinder, this is what you'll see. So it's not going to look like the cylinder has any kind of depth, unless you add some sort of shadow to it to indicate that it is actually a volume. So this is what this little eye here represents. So this eye here sees this part. So he sees the cylinders from the side, and us on the other end, we see this from the front. So imagine we're the camera looking at this. So what we see here when we look straight at this cylinder is the same as this person here. So you can see here what he sees ends here. So everything in that triangle, everything here is what this eye is going to be able to see. So what is this? It's just a square. If we look at it from the front, it's just going to be a square like this, because we can't see from the top. We can't see the top here, and we can't see the bottom. We're just at eye level. However, if this eye suddenly looks up at this cylinder here, now what is he going to be able to see? He's going to be able to see all the way to this corner. You draw a straight line all the way to this corner, and then all the way to that part. So he's going to be able to see all of this thing here and this thing here. So what is this? This part here, that's the bottom of the cylinder. And then here, the other part that you can see, that's the length of the cylinder. And then the same way, if you look down, you'll be able to see this part here, this part here. Everything that's in this cone here is its field, is the field of vision of this particular person. This is what that eye can see of this object. So we're going to be able to see this edge here, and we're going to be able to see this edge here. And those translate to this here being the top part of the cylinder, and then this one here being the length kind of like going away from the eye, right? So this corner here, this side of the cylinder is closer in distance than this side is. So this corner here, this part here is going to appear closer than this part here. Alright, hope that makes sense. Now what we'll need to be able to draw is cylinders like this in any kind of angle. So let's say I take this cylinder here and I rotate it a little bit. So we're going to do the same exercise. So we're going to rotate it just like this so that it faces the eye almost perfectly. Let's say it faces the eye perfectly. What is this eye going to be able to see? So we're going to trace those lines, straight lines, hit the corner here, but if we keep projecting that line, you see nothing else, right? So we're not going to be able to see this side here. So this side in red, we're not going to be able to see. We will see, however, this side here, they'll mark in blue, so we can see that part for sure. And then let's project that line again and see. Alright, here we go. And then as you can see here, we're going to be able to see all the way up to the corner, all the way up to the edge of the cylinder, but nothing else. So everything here, we're not going to be able to see, because this is facing away from the eye. The only thing that the eye can see is everything that's in blue. So the eye can see this part here, the eye can see this part here on this one, but everything else in red, the eye does not see. So in this case, you know, what this person sees now is just this blue area, and we remember what the blue area was. It was this here. It was the top of the cylinder. So if that's all that person can see, and if this is a perfect cylinder, meaning it's a round shape, you know, a round 3D shape, well, that person here, that's what she sees. Just a circle, because that's the top of the cylinder. Cylinder seen from the top, like this person is seeing it from the top, is just a circle. So that's the point of view from this person right here. Okay, so that's a lot, I'm sure. But to try this, you know, so the way to draw those cylinders, we now have the lines that we drew for the mannequin here. So we have all the lines for all the limbs. So when you have one line like this, so let's do one section. So let's take this section here from the elbow to the shoulder and see what this looks like as a cylinder. So we have one point here, another point here, and then a line connecting the two dots, right? So this is our limb. So this is the elbows right here, the shoulders right here. The way to draw this in perspective, or the way to draw a cylinder out of this now, because this is what we'll have to do. We'll have to take all those limbs, all those straight lines, and turn those into volumes instead. So if there was no perspective whatsoever, and we looked at this from the front, from the point of view of the camera, this is what it would look like. It would be a simple rectangle, and then what I like to do is I like to subdivide this. So always subdivide from the center and then subdivide again, and then more if I need to. But if there was no perspective, if this arm was flat, parallel to the surface, parallel to the canvas, we wouldn't see any kind of volume. It would be exactly the same as this here. So it would be like looking at this if this was subdivided in the same way. So this is what we're looking at right now. Doesn't seem like there's any perspective going on. But if we look at the arm here, it doesn't seem as flat as this portion here. So we're going to draw that separate. What you would do, instead of drawing a flat line here, instead of drawing a straight line, because that would mean that there is no perspective at all, if you want to introduce a little bit of perspective, so if we want this arm, this portion of the arm, the forearm, to look the same as this cylinder right now, because if we look at the hand seems closer than the elbow. It's closer to the camera, It's closer to us than the elbow is. I'm sure you can probably agree by looking at it. Just the same way as, this, let's hide the lines, the same way as this knee right here, it's closer to the camera than this one right here that's in the back, right? Same thing here. So this wrist is slightly closer to the camera than the elbow. Slightly, just slightly. Not super apparent. It's not like this one here where you have the elbow right here and the shoulder right here, and then this one, this joint here, this elbow is all the way back compared to the shoulder. So the shoulder is in front and the elbow is pushed back, recessed into the canvas. Now if we bring this back up, this would mean that we will need to do a cylinder in 3D now. So the way to do this, when you have this already, is you just draw a circle, an ellipse around the dot that you drew. And then you do the exact same thing like it was a planet, like you have the sun in the center and then like a planet, like an orbit around it. And you do exactly the same thing around here, same size too. At least try to make it the same size. And then what you do from there, once you have those two little planets, those two little like mini solar system, the only thing that you have to do is connect the edges like this to finalize the cylinder. But now we have a problem. Obviously, we don't know if the cylinder is pointing away, is coming towards us, or is receding in the background, in the distance. So I'm gonna erase a couple things here, and you'll be able to tell me, and you should be able to notice right away what's happening with the cylinder. So let's say I erase this part here. Now suddenly it looks, if we draw again the lines that we draw here, split in half, split in half, split in half. I'm trying to make sure that right now I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this curve here should be the same curve that you draw in the center here. So not more pronounced, exact same curve. So like this, it seems like we're looking at the bottom of the cylinder, just like in this example right here. So what this means is that from this point of view, this is this cylinder here, and it means that the cylinder is going away from us. So we're seeing the bottom part, and then the top part is going away from us, away from the camera. So this would be this example right here. But then if I hide, or if I erase the other part, if I erase the bottom instead, now suddenly it's the opposite. Suddenly we're seeing the top of the cylinder, just like in this example right here. It's the same. And I think that this is what this arm actually is. So if we hide this, and then like I said, if the wrist is closer to the camera than the elbow is, this would be this example here. So the top part here, closer to the camera than the bottom part is, just like in our example right here. It would be this one, right? Like we said. So if the top part is closer to the camera, like it is right here, so this section here is closer to the camera, it's closer to the eye. And when I say eye, I mean camera, it doesn't matter, eye or camera. This part here that he sees, the blue part, is closer than this other part here. So this would mean that the wrist, which is at the top here, the wrist is closer to the camera than the elbow. So this works, right? And then when you add the two, and you combine the two, we would now have this arm. So this would be a representation of this arm right here. So the relationship between those two lines, the two green lines. So one of them, this one here, from shoulder to elbow, not much of a perspective, and then from elbow to wrist, a slight perspective, a slight bend, with the wrist coming closer to the camera compared to the elbow. So there you go. So I hope this makes sense. To recap again, when you have a circle, not a circle, but a dot for like a joint, all you have to do is create an ellipse around those two dots, connect the edges, and then depending on which one is going away, if the bottom is going away from the camera, if the top is closer, then you can get rid of that line here to indicate that the bottom of the cylinder is going away from the camera in comparison to the top, and the top is closer. And if you want to do the opposite, then all you have to do is erase the top instead. There you go. So now we're seeing the bottom, and then the top part of the cylinder is further back than the bottom of the cylinder. So while this might seem a little bit simple, what's tricky now is to have the cylinder in different kind of angles. So let's say you have a very slight angle like this, or a more pronounced angle like this, or a very pronounced angle like this. So I'm going to copy those over. There you go, so easy way. And now if I join the sides, alright, and now I'm going to erase just the bottom here quickly. So now as you can see, those are three different cylinders, and they represent each three, they represent different perspective. So in this case, we're looking at the cylinder more from the side view, like this one, and this one here, we're looking at it more from the top view. So we're seeing a lot more of the top portion of the cylinder than we're seeing in this angle. So there's obviously all the way to the perfect circle here where you don't see anything else, but there's a nice, like an infinite range essentially of different angles that can be in between. So you just have to be good at drawing cylinders in all kinds of angles, and it all comes down to the initial ellipse that you draw. So that ellipse really indicates the angle of the rest of the limb. So the rounder the ellipse is, the closer to a perfect circle it is, the more foreshortening you'll have in your limb. So, and then the flatter it is, the flatter the ellipse is, the closer to a straight line it is, then you can imagine that there's basically no perspective at this point. So if you have a circle, if you start with a circle, a perfect circle, you're seeing at it completely from the top. If there's no circle at all, if it's a straight line, you're looking at it completely from the side. And then anything in between will have different kinds of ellipses depending. So a nice test to get familiar with this is to just draw those cylinders onto the bodies that you can see. So we're going to do that exercise here with one of them. So let's take one that has a lot of cool angles to work with. So this one here, for example. So all that you do here is draw start with the ellipses, and of course you're probably going to fail a couple times, especially if you've never done this before, and it's fine. You have to obviously practice a lot to be able to spot the angle at which the leg is, or not just the leg, but the angle of the limbs in space. So it's another thing. Initially we were trying to spot all the main features, where the joints are, where the pelvis, the rib cage, the head, where all those things are. Now we're looking at how those are actually placed in space. So it's next level for sure, but it's a very important exercise that we need to really become good at this. So the very first step would be obviously to find your joints, and of course this comes after tracing the basic skeleton, the basic mannequin. So you find your line of action, of course, and then you find your pelvis, and then you find your joint, and then once you have your joints drawn onto the model, now you're able to create a cylinder around those joints. So I'm gonna hide all of this so that we don't see, so that it doesn't get in the way. But understand that, you know, this comes after you have the joints drawn on the actual model, or if you're drawing this from imagination. So the first step would be to once you've established where the joints are, is to draw the ellipse. The ellipse that is going to be closer to the camera. So that's the one that I draw all the time. So the way to do this is you identify which of the joints is closer to the camera. In this case, this joint right here, the hip joint, will be a little bit closer. And the way that you can kind of tell, it varies depending on the pose. So sometimes it'll be a lot easier. Sometimes it'll be kind of challenging to decide which is closer. In this case, it's a little bit tricky to decide, but I always look at the actual photo to tell me. So when you look at the knee here, you don't see much of the knee. You're looking at the side of the knee for the most part, and you know, in comparison to this one right here, where you see the knee like facing forward almost, so you can almost see all of it. And another good example is this one right here, where you see most of the knee and you don't see any of the back of the leg. In this case, I see some of the back of the leg and not much of the knee that's in front. So this would indicate me that this joint right here, the knee joint, is further away than this one right there, indicating also that the cylinder is going to be in this direction. Again, you would draw the first ellipse, and that first ellipse is always the one that is closer to the camera based on the orientation of the limb. And then that ellipse would go all the way down to the joint, and then you connect those lines like this, and then to be able to trace, you know, that initial circle that splits the cylinder in half, very simple. All you have to do is look at the sides here. So you take this side, where's the middle point on that side? It's right here. Look at this side here, where's the middle point? Right here. And then obviously don't do a straight line in the middle, that's not going to work. That line that you're drawing in the center has to match this line here, so it's the same curve. Whatever you have here, you draw the same curve in the center, just like that. There we go. And then you can do the same thing here, split in half, and this way we get a nice sense of what that leg looks like in 3D. And I like to, you know, even add some more so that it's even more obvious. For this part here, the other section, you do the same thing. So this one's going to be almost flat, almost no perspective there. Just a little bit here. And again, as you can see, we're seeing the top part a little bit more. So very subtle angle for this one cylinder. This one here is a lot more obvious. And then now we can get to a more interesting one. This one here in the back. So this would be here, and we have a nice starting line with the bottom of the butt cheeks. So we can actually use that. So we're going to continue that line and create a circle for it. Not quite a circle, because we're not looking at it quite from the top. So that feels about right. And then it's one of those things, you know, like a lot of trial and error goes into this. So you might draw your circle and then connect your lines. And then if you look at it like this, it doesn't quite work. And in that case, you know, you can always arrange, you can always you know, tweak the circles that you draw them again. That's not a problem at all. Alright, so that's a little bit more like it. Of course, this line here I'm just drawing so that I get a sense of my cylinder. After that, you can always erase it. But then we're going to take the midpoint here between those two lines, midpoint, and then I'm going to draw same curve again, same curve as this one, Trying to follow that curve as best as possible. Alright, something like this, and then another one in the middle. So this is the top of the cylinder, and this is the top of this cylinder, which again we can see a lot more of. So this means that this limb here is in a much more intense perspective than this one here. So this one is going way deeper inside the scene, inside the canvas, than this one is. This one's almost flat. This one is, the knee here is way in the back. And then for this part of the leg, it's actually coming back a little bit. So when this is the case, I like to change the color to blue, because this means that this cylinder is coming towards us. And the way I distinguish the two cylinders is whenever you can see the top of the cylinder, like this one, like this one here, I consider the bottom to be kind of like the direction of. So, you know, if this is the way that this goes, if this is the top and this is the bottom is going away from the camera, it's going away from the top. This one is very subtle, but still, you know, this part here, the top of the cylinder is a little bit closer to the camera than the bottom of the cylinder. So that's what I mean by that. And then in this case here, the top of the cylinder we're not going to be able to see. What we'll see is the bottom of the cylinder, just like that. So in this case, the knee is further back, and the ankle is closer to the camera. So this cylinder here and this cylinder here, they would be kind of like opposites. So this one we can see the top and we can't see the bottom. This one we can't see the top, but we can see the bottom right here. So there you go. And then this is the exercise. Alright, so you don't have to do it for the torso, but for all the limbs, this is the idea. It's always a matter of looking at the image and trying to gauge which joint is closer to the camera and which is further back. So in some cases it's going to be very hard to tell, and when it's hard to tell, it means that it's likely this scenario here, where it's just from your point of view, it's actually flat. There's the joint at the top here and the joint at the bottom here. There's none of them are closer to the eye. They're the same distance to the eye. But when you have a scenario like the top here, where this joint here is obviously closer than this other one here. So, you know, if we tilt this cylinder, now suddenly the joints that used to be at kind of like the same distance from the eye, now this joint right there is a lot closer in comparison. This one is close, this one's pretty far. So this will indicate the direction of the cylinder, the direction of the volume. So in this case, when the bottom joint is closer, then you'll see the bottom of the cylinder, which means the top of the cylinder is going to go away from the viewer, away from the camera. So in this case, you know, which one is closer for this leg, kind of hard to tell. So you have a joint here, you have a joint there, a joint there. I would say that's probably going to be flat, like a rectangle. We're not going to be able to see much of a cylinder here. Maybe a very subtle cylinder, which means a very flat circle, flat ellipse at the top here and at the bottom, where the bottom of the leg would be like facing, not facing, but would be a little bit further back, so that would be in red. But it'd be very subtle, kind of like this one right here. And then you can look at different ones. So if we look at this one here, this is another one that's pretty simple to see. So we can look at the knee right there, and that knee is much closer to the camera than the hip joint. So, you know, in this case, this cylinder, you would see the bottom of the cylinder because that part would be closer. The bottom of the cylinder would be closer to the camera, so you would see the bottom, and then you wouldn't see the top because the top would be farther away. So the cylinder would look something like this. There you go, and then you would see the bottom. So I hope this makes sense. I know it's not an easy concept if this is something that you've never done before, but practice drawing different cylinders first. So do this exercise. It's very simple. You just draw two ellipses that are similar. First one, second one, then connect. And you can do like really thin ones or really big ones, and then connect them and see what those look like. So get good first at being able to draw cylinders like this, and then once you're good, start splitting them up like this, like what I did, and adding subdivisions so that you can get a better idea of where everything is situated in space. And then once you're really good at drawing cylinders, then start drawing them on the models like this. Try placing your ellipses in the right spot, in the right angle. You'll get better and better the more you do it, and the better you get at spotting which joint is in front. So yeah, the first thing that you have to look at when you're about to draw like this on a model is to spot which of the joint is closer to you. Joint here, joint here. Which one is the closest to me? In this case, it would be this one. So I would see the top of the cylinder for that joint, and then whatever is further away, you don't see the bottom of it. So there you go. Once you get good at spotting where the joints are in space, then it makes the drawing the cylinder a lot easier. So it's all a matter of developing kind of like your eye to be able to tell what is closer to you and what is further from you. In some cases, it's very obvious. Like I said, this one here, you have the knee that's clearly coming towards us, towards the camera, as opposed to the hip here that's further back. So in this case, we're seeing the bottom of the cylinder because the knee joint is closer to us. In this case, we're seeing the top of the cylinder because the hip joint is closer to us. But yeah, so drawing those kind of figures, it's all about being able to spot what perspective each limb is in, and then drawing them accordingly in space using cylinders. And then once we get really good at this, then drawing characters in any kind of pose becomes a lot easier. So first cylinders, then cylinders on the body. Then you can practice drawing cylinders next to the body, so using the image as a reference, and then drawing the cylinders on your own after you've drawn your entire skeleton. Alright, now that we have a better understanding of kind of like basic proportions, basic figure landmarks, and also how to position, or how at least to get a better understanding of how the limbs are in space, how they are positioned in space, by using simple cylinders instead of thinking of those as actual limbs with muscles and everything on it. You don't want to go there just yet. We're keeping it simple with simple shapes that everybody can understand. Once we're good with this, once everything makes a lot more sense, then comes the time to look at the actual real proportions. So not something that is just a really simple average, but looking at kind of like the real human proportions and what that normally looks like. So this is going to be what we look at in the next chapter. Now that we know how to build a simple skeleton representing a figure, let's dive a little bit deeper and look at all the major features of the body and their corresponding proportions. There are several methods to draw the human figure, and many ways to subdivide it in order to calculate correct proportions. But most of those methods never really make it easier for artists to draw the actual figure. At least not in my experience. So far, we've seen how to construct a simplified human skeleton or a mannequin. We've started it with something very simple, like a line of action, and we gradually increased kind of like the detail all the way up to kind of like an advanced stick figure, like we saw in the previous chapter. Now is the time to actually push that figure that was very simplified, and then push it a little bit further, something a little bit more towards a real anatomy. We're still going to keep it super simple. Think of this next step as a Barbie or a Ken doll. So it's obviously human looking, but extremely simplified. The jump from that step to a more realistic figure will be once we tackle the anatomy class. So since ancient Greece, Western artists usually calculate the height of the human body using the head size as the reference. It's just a good measure of, it's most of the time what you start with. So it's the first thing that you'll put down on paper as far as the body part. And it just makes a lot of sense to calculate everything by the head. But mine is going to be kind of a mix, like a simplified version of the Andrew Loomis's method. So let's start by drawing a vertical line to represent the height of the figure and its axis of symmetry. So we'll go into more details in the anatomy class, like I said, but for now let's only worry about the front view in a stiff standing pose, both for males and females. So this line here in the center will represent the full height of the figure. So whenever you're drawing on a piece of paper or on any canvas, you know that you'll have enough room on the canvas. So the first thing we want to do once we have that line, we'll split it in 8 equal parts. Each of those parts will represent one head, which is typically what is considered perfect human proportions, at least in classical art. In reality, the average person, and of course, there's such a range that the average really doesn't mean much when talking about people, but they say, at least in the books, that the average person will be more around 7.5 heads tall, at least the average male. That's actually true for females as well. But yeah, obviously this varies a lot from one person to another. And when drawing the figure, it's just good to keep as a guideline to avoid ending up with a character that is, obviously like way off, like only 5 heads tall, for example, or just good proportions to know that you can start with this and know for sure that your character is going to be in proportions. And after that, once you get mastery of this, you can actually push it, deform it, and then stylize it, and then do all kinds of things to it once you're comfortable with actual, like, real known, accepted average proportions for the human body. So also, it's good to note that all these proportions are most useful for a standing model. Obviously, if you have the model, or if your drawing is going to be in perspective, or if there's going to be any kind of foreshortening, of course that's not going to work and it won't apply as much. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started with this. Alright, so exactly like we've done up until now, we want to place our 3 main shapes in here first. So we'll have the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. So we don't have to do the line of action, obviously, because there is no such thing in here, but we're going to start with the head. So a lot of the things that I'm going to do here is splitting these squares in thirds, because this just works really well. So either in thirds or in halves. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is split the first one here in 3 different parts, and this is going to help us create the head. So this is the first thing we'll do. With the first third here, so we take the point here, this is going to be the center of a circle that we're going to draw. Alright, so we're going to draw a nice little circle right here, with the top of the box being the top of the head, and then this is also going to be the line of the nose, so the bottom here, and then right in the halfway point right there, the diameter, this is going to be the line for the eyebrows. So next we're going to have the chin all the way at the bottom of this box. So chin, you want a little bit of width, and then you're going to go up and do kind of like a wide V, something like this, really wide. And then when you're almost as like as wide as the actual circumference of this circle here, now it's time to go up. Don't go all the way, don't go as wide, but almost, and then you try to go up and then kind of like connect those lines here so that they're flush. Alright, so this would be the head, and of course you can have the ears on here. I like to have the ears kind of like start the curve at the eyebrow line. So something like that. Alright, and then you would have the mouth and the halfway point right here. So super simple. Half, 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 half. It's always this is why I like this method, because everything fits so nicely into place. There you go. So we're gonna have the face like this, and then the eyes would go, somewhere right below the eyebrow line, right here. Alright, now for the neck. The neck is going to be, for males, it depends, but it's normally almost as wide as the face itself. So I'm going to go with something like this, almost as wide. If the character is really, really muscular, it could be as wide, but rarely bigger than this. And then we're going to go ahead, and now that we've done the head, we are going to do the rib cage. So we're going to split the next section here in thirds as well, and right here, the third box, this point here, this is going to be the navel, where the belly button is, and this is going to be kind of like the bottom of the rib cage. This is going to be the top here, and also happens to be where the clavicles are going to be. And also you can draw a line like this, horizontal line. This is going to be kind of like the top of the shoulders as well. So what we're going to do here is split this line here in thirds as well, so like this, and then the second part here, this is going to be kind of like the outer edge of the rib cage. So we'll want to draw a nice circle, not a circle, but like a nice curve around all those points that we drew. So make sure it's not too pointy anywhere, like this, nice and curvy. Alright, there we go. So now we have our rib cage done. We have the navel right here, and then this is also going to be the start of the pelvis. So the pelvis, very similar story. We're going to go ahead and split this in half. So for the pelvis, super simple. We're going to use the same line. So we're going to take this line all the way down, or you can also split this thing in thirds. It's the same way we did for the rib cage, and then this is going to be the width of the hips, or the pelvis for the male. So we're going to bring this up just a little bit, because this is going to be the sides, the limits of our next oval. There we go. And then what's really nice with this method is that at the halfway point right here, this is where the crotch is, and this is also where the wrists are. And so this splits the character in half. So you have the crotch right here, and then if you go 2 squares down, this line here, this would be kind of like the halfway point of the leg. This would also mark the bottom of the knees. Then you have the knee go up like this, and then also this last line here, the last one at the bottom, this one is where the calves begin. So this is where the calf attaches on the leg, at the bottom part of the leg. So we're gonna work our way down later. I just wanted to place these landmarks here so that you know what this is going to be, and we're gonna go back up here, kind of work on the line for the torso. So the way this is going to go is this is going to be the full width of the torso. The pectoral muscle is going to be a little bit well, they're not going to be as wide as this. So this is the width of the back, including the lateral muscles. So this is a little bit bigger than it actually is. So this would be as wide as this if you look at it from the back, but from the front it'll look a little bit smaller. So we'll start the pectoral muscles at the halfway point instead of the third. So you'll have something like this, right? Pectoral muscles going in, going down, kind of like a really wide W. So something like this. And then for the shoulders, so let's place the shoulders. Now we have the end of the shoulder, the limit here of the box is going to be as far as the shoulders go. So right here, then we can have the curve go up, touch right here, and then go back. So that would be the line for the shoulder, and then we go back in a little bit, and then meet with the bicep. That would start somewhere around here. Alright, so this is the shoulders, and then let's connect with the neck. So once you're about like 2/3, so again, the same 2/3 right here. When the line for the shoulder gets around here, so join it up to match the neck, so something like that. So now we have the outside of the upper body. Now we're going to go down and do the same thing for this here. So very simple here. At the halfway point, again, where this is the waist, right? So this is the waistline where the navel is. What we're going to do is just take this line here, the widest part of the rib cage, and then connect it at the halfway point here on the waistline. And then what we're going to do is just connect all those dots, kind of like do a nice soft line, a nice curve here, hugging the pelvis, and then joining up with this line right here. And then yeah, this is going to be the line for the leg. So we can keep going for this, like this. There we go. And then at the bottom right here, so this, remember, this is where the calf muscle is going to start, and it's going to peak about at the halfway point here, so something like this. Trying to do both at the same time, and then from here you'll have kind of like a bump, and then it'll just touch in the center, just like that. Alright, so now we're going to draw the rest of the leg. So right here the calf muscle goes kind of like a nice curve outside, and then down to the ankle, then you have the bones here, and then the inside ones just a little bit higher. And then we'll connect all of this. And there you have it, so that would be the legs. Alright, so for the calves, it's always this part here where they touch is always a little bit lower. So the inside part is always a little bit lower than the outside. So you'll have kind of like a V like this. But anyways, and then for the feet, you can just start kind of like the foot like this, and then do like just a pyramid. I'm not gonna worry about drawing the feet at this point, and this is just for basic proportions. Alright, so we're almost there. Next up is going to be placing kind of like the elbows for this guy. So lucky us, once again, the elbow happens to be right on that line here, right on the waistline. So we're going to do like some nice circles for it. And then the wrists, you guessed it, right here. Actually, I probably said that already. But so yeah, they're going to land right on that, that halfway point. So there you go. Now all we have to do is kind of just connect everything. Alright. Like this. Again, you know, for this you can do like just straight lines. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about the muscles just yet. This is all about proportions. Do not worry about anatomy. Again, like I said, this is like a Ken doll. Not a candle, a Ken doll, like a Barbie. Yes, there we go. And then the clavicles, like I said, you know, they'll be around here. So there we go. And then the hand would go almost all the way down here. Well, not really, but so this is the wrist right here. The hand would then start, and the knuckles would be about the halfway point of this box. Actually, right at the halfway point of this box right here. So you'd find the knuckles right there. And then you can add the fingers to that. So it would make that a little bit longer, but it would still not touch, you know, the bottom here. So there you have it. So this would be a correct proportions for a idealistic male figure. So of course, you know, this guy is pretty buff. He's not a small fry. But that is quite realistic for a person. Alright, just gonna clean up a little bit. Remove these lines. There you go. So this would be the ideal male. Of course, again, the anatomy is a little bit off. We'll worry about that later. As far as proportions, this guy is pretty spot on. So maybe the shoulders would go a little bit higher. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is that his nipples are also supposed to land on this one line right here. So they just happen to be there because those are the dots that I drew when you split it. When I split it in in thirds, and also happens to be the spot for the nipple. So perfect. There we go. And then yeah, so this guy, of course, he could have like a nice six-pack and everything, but we're gonna skip over that for now and move on to the female. So female is going to be very, very, very similar, except a couple details that are going to be quite different. So they're pretty important to know what those are. But essentially, it's going to be the shoulders are going to be not as wide, and then the hips are going to be a little bit wider in comparison. Doesn't mean that they're going to be wider, just wider in comparison. So for the female, we're going to do exactly the same thing. So 2/3 right here. What's interesting with the female is that even though they are shorter on average, so as you can see here, this is the average female, 5'6". So everything is a little bit lower, but the proportions remain the same because the size of the head is actually smaller in proportions as well. So it all works out. Doesn't mean anything. Size of the head doesn't mean anything. But on average, female head size is a little bit smaller. So we're going to do exactly the same thing, just with softer curves. So the V is going to be a little bit more. It's just going to have a smaller angle, and then we're going to do the same thing, kind of like connect right here. Right here, start with the ears. Same deal, start the line right there. And then, so this is the center, this is the brow, the eyebrow line right here. This is the nose line, mouth, and there we go. So for female, the neck is going to be a little bit thinner than the male's, but again, it's pretty much in proportion. So it's not going to be as wide, obviously, but close to it. And then all the other landmarks are going to be exactly the same. So we're going to go in really quickly. Navel is going to be down here. This is the clavicles, so it means the neck goes down a little bit more. And then joins up like about right here. And we'll have the shoulders, and then the shoulders in this case is going to go only 2/3 of the way. So 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. So this is going to be how far. Wait. So yeah, for the female, it's going to be exactly the same. So we'll trace a line right here. At this point here, this is going to be where the shoulders are. Just like that. And then the torso, same deal. 1, 2, 1, 2. So we're going to trace the circle for it. Like that. At the midway point here, we have the crotch. And then for the hips, you know, for women, it depends. So you don't have to go as wide as this. What I like to do personally is to have it kind of like go at the 2/3 mark, so the same as the hips that I'm going to do. But technically speaking, the shoulder is always a little bit wider. But again, you know, it really depends from one person to another, which is why I feel like these models are very subjective as far as to what the average is. But so we'll do it right. We'll do it, you know. We'll do it by the books for the first one here. So shoulders right there, and then pelvis again 2/3, same as the male. So right here, so it's about right here. All right. So that would be the hips. But then at the instead of going like straight down like right in, with women it tends to go out a little bit before it goes back in. So we're gonna go about like 3/4 of the way on the outside here of this midline, and then it's going to be the same deal. So this is going to be the bottom of the knee right here, the halfway point. And then so we can do this right here. And have this go back in. Alright, and then the waist. For the female, instead of being right here, you know, at where the navel is, for the female it's going to be actually a little bit higher than the male. So, you know, it's arbitrary, really. You know, if you want to calculate it, we can do thirds again. So a third here, a third here. So I would have the waist go almost all the way up here, maybe a little bit lower than that. So something like this. There we go, something like that. And then same deal, you know, you join the lines here, kind of hug the line that we already have for the curve of the rib cage, and then there we go. And then we're going to draw the rest of the legs real quick. And yeah, for the elbows, it's going to be the same thing. So you can trace the ball here, where the elbow is going to be, right at the waistline, or at least at the male waistline, so where the navel, let's call it the belly button line, and same, the wrist going to land right here on the crotch line, and so we can connect the dots, something like this. And I think you can see why I like to have the shoulders be a little bit narrower, so a little bit closer to the hips width, because otherwise she looks, you know, it's kind of accurate this way, but it looks a little bit on the manly side. But anyway, so I'm going to do the knuckles, same thing at the halfway point of this box here. Knuckles right there, and then the fingers would go a little bit lower, same deal. And that would be the proportions, the correct proportions for a female character. So one thing I didn't do here is the nipples for the female would go, instead of going here, to be a little bit lower, of course, depending on the size of the breasts. So if the breasts are non-existent, well, they'll be in the same spot almost. Otherwise, you know, you can make them drop a little bit, depending. So something like that. There you go. So there you have it. This would be a proportionally correct female by most standards. So what I like to do, like I said, I like to bring in the shoulders a little bit more. So instead of being this wide, I like to push them in just a bit. And of course, this is also completely valid. Everybody's got different kind of shoulders, but I like the shoulders to be about the same width as the hips, maybe a little bit wider, to not break too many things. But yeah, there we go. So, and you have the clavicles right here. And there you have it. So you have a female right there and a male in the correct proportions. So I hope this technique works for you. This is the one that I've been using for forever, pretty much. It's really easy to remember. It's actually, you don't really have to remember much. The second that you draw this grid, or that you draw like the different that you draw the line with all the separations in here, everything kind of falls into place on its own. So this is why I really like this this proportion chart, if you want to call it that, because yeah, you really don't need to remember much. Everything just falls into place. Everything is kind of just logical. So of course, use this as a guide in case you forget, but you'll see the second that you start using it, you draw it once, twice, 3 times, maybe after that you should be able to remember the whole thing without ever looking again. So yeah, I mean, in reality, the legs would be a little bit shorter for both male and female, probably half a foot shorter. So the leg would probably end up being right here instead. So a little bit more stumpy, for the most part. But what's the fun in that? And those people actually exist, so might as well draw kind of like the perfect version of the human body, and use that as a guide. And then from there you can actually modify anything you want. But yeah, I really like this one because everything is split so nicely. Everything just works out without having to think much at all. So this is going to wrap up the human proportions. In the last chapter, we looked at how to create correct proportions. It's something that's really important to know, but you will run into problems when a character is not in a straight, stiff, standing pose and is instead in a more complicated foreshortened pose. The measurements will change the way they are perceived by our eye. Foreshortening changes those relationships. So if you're drawing from imagination, then those measurements will be incredibly important, since it'll be the only kind of guidance that you have when drawing the figure, and you'll have to do your best to translate those into in perspective. But when drawing from life or from a photo reference, you have the opportunity to measure. Measuring is only exclusive to observational drawing, and you won't use it as much when purely drawing from imagination. But since you'll likely always be using some sort of reference, whether it be, like looking at your hands, or looking at your leg, or looking at yourself in the mirror, it's a very useful tool to add to your toolbox. It also happens to tune your eye to what is correct, reducing mistakes that you'll make over time. The first measuring technique that I want to mention here, and this is especially good for non-digital artists, or if you want to practice this drawing on paper, or if you want to practice this at a live drawing session, which I highly recommend that you try. This is going to be measuring with a pencil. And why would you measure with a pencil? Well, it is simply because it's the one tool that you have in your hand at all time when you're drawing. So it makes this a really convenient measuring tool. So there's a couple of things that you will want to make sure of before we actually start anything, and it's the posture, how you hold your pencil. That's going to have a big impact on the actual results of the measurements. So the one thing that we want to make sure of first is to not bend your arm. So you want to have your arm completely straight, just like this. And then we'll hold the pencil just like in the drawing here, and we'll want to have it stick out from the top. and so we can use our thumb to measure the distance from the top of the pencil all the way to the thumb. And then essentially what we're going to be measuring here is most of the time the head of the model. So we'll use this very similarly to how we used the head in a previous chapter to measure the overall proportions. We'll use the same method here to give us kind of like the number of head to place down on our paper, on a sheet of paper, so that we know how many heads total from top to bottom do we need to consider. And then we'll know that once we have those boundaries established, that everything is going to fit within this area of the sheet of paper, so that we know that we're not going to go too long or too little. Holding the pen out straight like this, though, is not 100% accurate for one reason in particular, and it is because we might hold the pencil differently. So the second that you move your arm a little bit, the length from your eye to the pencil is going to change, as we can see here. So this is the exact same distance on all of those drawings, but just the way that you're holding the pen actually has a pretty big impact on the distance between your eyes and the pen, as you can see here. So it's the same distance, but it's a lot shorter in this example. And if you hold it down and it's the opposite, it's a lot longer. So one way to solve this issue is to tilt your head and then place your ear on your shoulder. And then this way you'll see, when your ear is placed on your shoulder, if you want to look up, your head and your arm is going to move up at the same time. And if you want to look down, then your head along with your arm is going to move down at the same time as well. So this should reduce, or at least, it should eliminate or at least reduce the disparity in distances when measuring from different angles, depending if you're looking up or down or straight up. And one more thing, we'll want to make sure that we close one of the eyes. So by doing this, by placing your head along your arm, so as close as possible to your arm, we're essentially doing the same as a kind of like a sniper looking through a scope on the rifle. So this is going to be the same idea here. We want our point of view to be as close as possible as the arm, so that whenever we measure something, we know that we have a reference to go by. So if we always do this, we'll know that the measurement is going to be consistent. What you would do in this case, for example, is start by measuring the size of his head. So, like I said, this would be about this size for the head. So this would be one head. Now what we want to do is calculate how many heads we're going to need how many head space we're going to need on our sheet of paper or canvas. So right here, this is 1. And then to calculate the total, just look at where the thumb lands and then place the tip of the pencil right there in space to calculate another one. So right there you see like it lands right on the cheek. Not the cheek, right on the chin. So you place the tip right there, and then that calculates 1 unit, and then the second one, and then right here, right about here would be another one. So 3. Look down here. 4. Look down here. 5. Look down here. 6. And then 6 and like 6 1/4, something like that, for the entire height of this model. And then all we have to do right here is place those landmarks on a sheet of paper. So first, the top of the body would be right here. And a little bit, so about this much. All right, there we go. So now we know that this is the lower boundary of our drawing. This is the top one. The entire drawing should fit within all of these, within this area right here. Now that we have our unit of measurement, which is 1 head in this case, and it's about this much on our pencil, now we can use the same unit of measurement to measure other things and to kind of place different landmarks on our sheet of paper before we actually start to draw. The first thing I want to do here is find the halfway point of this figure. So I know he's 6 1/4 tall, so I'm going to be drawing a line right there, which is at the halfway point on my side, and I want to try to find out where that line is on the reference itself, on the model, and that lands about right in the center of the glute. So it's a good memory point to make, and in this way I'll know that everything that is below that line is going to be legs only. Kind of like a rookie mistake that a lot of people will make is as you work your way down the drawing, having the legs or certain limbs much longer than they should be or much shorter. So this way I know that everything below that line is supposed to be the legs anyways. So it prevents me from making that mistake. And what I did there is just creating a box around the entire figure using the same techniques, with measuring different head units. So I know that everything is going to fit in that box, except his left foot that's sticking out a little bit. And now I'm measuring the different joints as best as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. All we want to do at this point is try to put down a couple guidelines so that we can get started, in the best possible way. And then once we have a couple lines drawn on our canvas, then we'll be able to adjust things accordingly. So that's the whole point. What I like to do is put a couple things down and then adjust as you go. And then by looking at relationships between the different parts and different length of things, it makes that process pretty simple, pretty easy to figure out as you're going. So by looking at relationships between the different limbs, like a good way to look at this is, let's say you take his right shoulder all the way down to his hand, that length there is about the same length as one of his leg. So you know that if his leg is much shorter than that, then there's going to be a problem, and it's probably wrong. Another way to check your proportions is to look at empty space, at negative space. So if we look in between his arms, for example, look at the shape that the contour of his silhouette gives. In between his right arm and the side of his body. And if you look at the negative space, whatever's in white, essentially on the reference image, then that gives you an indication that if the shape of that silhouette is not it's not the same, then there's probably a problem with the drawing. So it's good to adjust that. So looking not only at the shape but at the negative space between the shapes. Same thing in between his legs. You can look at all that white in between. Look at that difference and what that looks like. And then looking at relationships, there's a lot of ways that you can use that also to correct yourself. So it's good. It's a good way to look at your drawing and try to spot mistakes, because the more that you have on paper, like I have right now, I have a pretty good silhouette, pretty good drawing, good drawing base at least. And then from there, I would go in and refine things and add kind of like all the muscle definition, all this stuff. But obviously, this is all things that will be much easier once you know the anatomy behind it, or if you know the anatomy behind it. A couple things here that you can look at, to correct yourself if you don't have the image right next to it. So if you're doing this digitally, it's super easy to spot your mistakes, and it's a really good way to autocorrect. And the way to do that is, well, you just grab your image or your drawing, and then you can just slide it over. So now you could look at this and be like, okay, so that left leg is not quite in the right position. There's a little bit of thickness here that I missed. So yeah, and that's a good way to to spot your mistakes. But overall the shape is pretty there. So it's not a perfect drawing, but it's a good start. And then that's when you're working digitally, that's the way to check for mistakes. Super simple. So you don't need anybody to correct. You don't need anybody's feedback or anything like that. You can just check against the photo and then spot the mistakes. It's as simple as that. But if you don't have that reference photo, if you're not working off a photo, if you're working off a live model, or if you're working on like a tablet and looking at your computer screen or something like that, there's a very simple ways to kind of troubleshoot any problems that you might have with your anatomy, and that's by again looking at a relationship. So if you look at the size of the leg right here, what you would want to look at is, I'll change the color so that's a little bit easier to spot. But if you look at the distance here, and then you look at the distance here. All right, that's about the same size, and then you can use that distance to look at the other parts of the body that share that same distance, that you can easily spot. So this distance here, it's about the same size as the abdomen. So if you look at your drawing and then suddenly, like if this distance and that distance are like way off on your drawing, then then that something is wrong, right? And that would mean that you need to fix that. And you can use that for a lot of different things. So maybe, if you look at the distance between the two sides of his legs right here at the ankle, it's about the same size as his wrists. So if you look at those two on your drawing and they're not the same, it's not the same length, those two distances, then there's probably a problem there as well. And then, like I mentioned, looking at the empty space, really good way to correct yourself as well. If you look at this shape here, what does it look like on my end? Is it that same shape? Is it that same silhouette? If it's way off, then you need to correct that. So empty space, really, really useful tool to have. And then one more thing that I really recommend that you use to check for mistakes, or while you're drawing it to avoid mistakes, is looking at vertical lines. So when you have a vertical line, vertical lines are pretty easy to spot on anything. You can imagine, you just look at anything that's vertical on this image and try to see, and by that I mean look at the extremities of things, so like the outside of the silhouette, and then trace a line down, like an imaginary line down. So if you go like this, this gives us a lot of information already. So you don't have to draw the line. You can just look at the model and kind of try to imagine that line. So if you look at it quickly like this, you could think, all right, so the top of his forehead lines up. If you trace a line down, it about lines up with his toe. So it's about the same spot here. So if you trace that same line on your drawing and it doesn't land there, then you can, again, it's another way to check for problems. And you can do the same thing for a lot of different stuff. So, looking at a straight line, his butt cheek right here, his left butt cheek, lands about at the same spot where his trap ends. So if those two don't line up, then there is a good chance that something is a little bit off. And, well, you can also use horizontal lines for that matter. Those work just as well. So, we can look at this one right here, and we see the elbow lining up with the curve of his lower back right there. And those are all on the same horizontal level. So if yours aren't, then, it's another thing to look for. And then there's one last method I wanna talk about, and that is patterns in the body, and not really patterns, but more like natural flowing lines, if that makes more sense. So I'll give you an example real quick. If we take this line right here, you can almost continue it this way. So, and there's many lines like this in the body that you can look at. So example, you take the curve here around its glutes, and it just happens to blend perfectly with the underside of his lateral muscle, the muscle in his back. And then you can do the same for all different lines in the body. There's always something that lines up with something else. You can take this line here, project it a little bit longer, bam, it lines up with the leg. Same if we look at the same line here for the spine, it just lines up with his head perfectly. And then you can look at the shoulder line here, again, wraps up around the hair, around the head. And there are lines like this everywhere on the body, like another one right here that you can continue. Another one right here. There's just those lines, you can find them anywhere. You just have to look a little bit, and then the second that you find a pattern like this on your reference image, try to look for the same pattern on your drawing to see if it's there or not. And you can do this once you're done to kind of just auto correct yourself, self critique your drawing, or you can do this while you're drawing, which is a really good thing to do as well. Never look at anything in isolation. Always look at the whole image, the whole thing in relations to and all the different parts of the body in relation to the other parts of the body, to make sure that you get those relationships down properly. And one more thing that you can quickly look at too, and it depends of the pose. In some cases, it's a little bit more valuable this way, but you can look at kind of like the overall shape that this silhouette gives. So imagine that you're wrapping this entire guy in like a bag or in like a wrapping paper, and try to go like just rough contour of the body. So you can look at that shape here and see, all right, do we have a match here? Can I put my own character inside the same package? This is a really good shape to draw, before you actually start to draw any of the limbs or any of the details. So what I did for myself, I drew a box like this because in this case, the character was standing up and it was a little bit more helpful. But in certain cases, I might want to do this instead. If the character is like crouching or something like this, the box might not be as useful. So in that case, I'll use kind of like the rough contour of the silhouette. I'll try to draw the same shape first on my end, and then kind of like draw everything that's inside. And then this makes it a lot easier to approach a drawing this way, once you have kind of like certain boundaries to work within. The more you do this exercise, the easier it will become. So at the very beginning, you'll probably rely a lot on those measurements. So get really good at measuring using your pen, or using, if you're not drawing on paper, if you're drawing digitally, of course, measuring with your pen doesn't really make much sense, but at least not in the way that I explained it. But in this case, you could very well still use kind of like the entire length of your pen, put it on the screen, on the computer screen, or on whatever screen your reference is on, and then use those units of measurement instead. So you can totally do the same thing, or at least variant of measuring with the pen when you're working digitally, which I highly encourage you to do. So this is something that you should be doing all the time, especially if you're not really good at this. The more you do it, the better you'll get, and you see it actually goes pretty quick, and then there's just things that will start to click and more things, and then at some point, all the tools that you've been learning up until now, they'll all kind of make sense. At least they'll all seem that they work together, and it will make drawing figures a lot easier. But for now, just practice. Make this exercise kind of like a daily thing, along with all the other exercises that we've done up until now. We're tackling a pretty complex subject here, which is the human figure. But all the techniques that we've looked at and all the different steps, they definitely apply to anything else. So whether you're drawing, as long as you're drawing from reference, essentially, which should be pretty much all the time. If you want to keep learning. So when you're working from reference, whether you're drawing an object or a person, those same measuring techniques apply. The same concept, where you're starting from something really rough, the rough shapes, and then adding more and more details as you go. It all applies. So this is something that will stick around for your entire life, and which is why it's really important that you get good at this. It's going to be really hard at the beginning, and that is completely normal. It remains hard pretty much your entire life, so it never gets that easy. But it is a really great way to develop your eye, and it will just help make you a better artist in general. Now, once you get to this point, what do you do? There's an obvious answer to this. Well, you could definitely polish this up and use it as a portfolio piece. So if your drawing looks pretty nice, and you decide to push it further, so add all the rest of the muscles and all this stuff, and maybe a little bit of shading if you're there already, those are great portfolio pieces or great studies, and you can share those online. If you're really proud of them, you can share those online to get feedback. You'll probably be proud of a really small percentage of everything that you create, which is completely normal. And if this is like way too advanced for you at this point, no problem. It's a class, it's a condensed class, obviously, so there's a lot of content here. Go back to the previous chapters, kind of really get good at those initial steps, at those initial fundamentals, and then increase in difficulty as you get more and more comfortable with it. and there's no right pace for it. There's no particular time that it should take you to get to this level. It's just a matter of how much time you have to practice. Obviously, the more you practice, the more hours that you spend in a day practicing this kind of stuff, the better you'll become, the faster you'll become. So yeah, go at your own pace, and once you get to this point, and once you can draw something like this more easily, then everything else that comes after, this class, this entire art school, all the different classes, everything is going to be much, much easier. So this is one of those fundamentals that are really, really, really important to get good at. This is obviously realistic, so we're drawing from life, from real photos. You might be wondering, so if I don't like this, if you don't like realism, why would you spend the time to work on this? And the answer, I think, that every experienced artist will always tell you is that you need this first before you can find your own style, before you can add more gesture to it, more character to it, more style to it. You really need to be able to do this first. It's like all the old masters, they never, you might look at a lot of their paintings, later in their life, and look at the paintings and be like, this is complete garbage, or like really not see the appeal that the painting has, that their work has. But you really need to understand that before they got to that point, this is kind of like a result of them knowing everything before, all the fundamentals, knowing all the color theory, knowing all the the figure drawing theories, perspective, and all this stuff, and mastering those. And then once you're really good at that, then you can develop your own style. Then you can do whatever you want, and nobody will ever kind of look at you weird, as long as you can do this. It's like if your style is really, really cartoony, and people tell you, well, you're just doing something cartoony because you can't do the real thing, then you can always shut them up by showing off your skills, right? Knowing that you have this fundamental that is really, really strong. And not only that, but having those strong fundamentals, those strong understanding of proportions and all this stuff will actually make your stylized characters more appealing. They'll be more believable. Their proportions are going to be more on point, even though they might be really, really stylized. Everything will work a little bit better. And so it's really, really important to get this down first. Next up, we're going to look at gesture drawing. So this is going to be in quite a contrast with what we've done so far, which is pretty realistic, pretty stiff in a sense, because we're drawing from reality. But next up, we're going to try to let go of that and go tackle a little bit more gesture. Try to kind of like free our minds of all the anatomy knowledge, all the proportion knowledge, and try to just grab the essence of the pose, just the gesture of the pose. So this is what we'll be focusing on next. This chapter is going to be all about gesture drawing. So gesture drawing is something that we haven't covered yet, and it's actually pretty important. But I wanted to put it to keep it for last, because it uses a lot of the knowledge and the techniques that we've seen thus far. Now, what is gesture drawing in comparison to figure drawing, for example? So figure drawing is a more general term that encompasses pretty much any kind of drawing of the human figure. So it can be quick, fast and slow, detail, no detail, whatever. Gesture drawing is just one part of figure drawing. And what gesture drawing is essentially it's a quick capture of the movement, the energy, and the pose of the character. So we're not going to be spending a lot of time on each of the drawings. Those are meant to be really, really quick drawings. Generally speaking, they'll range anywhere between like 30 seconds to 5 minutes. So as you can tell, those are pretty quick drawings. So it doesn't leave you enough time to go into the details and to really like draw the muscles, draw the anatomy, or nothing like that. You really only have time to capture the movement, capture the pose, and try your best, to maintain correct proportions. So, which is why we've seen the proportions so far, so we know kind of like what to expect. We know what to look for, and the main thing we'll be using here that we've seen so far is aside from proportions and from knowing kind of like what a normal human body should look like, we're going to be using the line of action quite a bit. So line of action here is going to direct a lot of the different poses. So we'll start by initially finding that line of action. This is the first thing that we really need to figure out whenever we see a new image. And then you try to draw the rest, and capture the pose of the model. So what we're going to be doing for this chapter is I'll be giving kind of like a demonstration of how I approach it, and every step of the way I'll try to explain kind of my thought process and the ways that I use to get as much as I can with the limited time that I have on the canvas. And again, this is something that you can do. You can be doing this on a computer. You can be doing this on a drawing tablet, on a sheet of paper. It really doesn't matter. And all you need is either a reference image or to do it from life. So you can be sitting at a cafe or something like that and try to sketch the people. Generally speaking, that's great for gesture drawing because they don't tend to stand still too long. So it gives you only a really short opportunity, a really short period of time to capture their movement and their pose before they disappear, and then you get to do this over and over again. So to get ready for this, all you'll need is a bunch of different images of models. So you can grab a couple from Google, whatever, or you can take photos of yourself, or you can have somebody in your house posing for you if they're willing to do that. In my case, I have a folder here, and then it's just going to cycle through the different images, and it has a timer attached to it. So, but yeah, you can do this, with your cell phone or any way you want, really. With the first batch of photos, so I'm going to select 30 seconds. So those are the first one that we're going to do. And by the way, if you dig this, which I really like it, that's why I'm using it. It's called gesture drawing. So in one word, gesture drawing and exclamation mark. You can find that on QBrush. And some guy made this, and it's pretty awesome. So what we're going to do, like I said, it's 30 seconds. So we're going to start with 30 seconds. 30 seconds is not a lot of time, especially when you're drawing. You'll see it goes by really quickly. So what I want you to try to do with this is to just do a stick figure, nothing more. Just a nice, stick figure. Start with stick figure, and then if you have any time left after that, you can add a little bit of, thickness to the limbs and things like that. But really, all you should really have time to do is a stick figure. So, but that's fine. That's the goal with this. We're not trying to come up with correct anatomy or anything like that. What we're trying to do here is look at the energy of the pose, look at the pose itself. This is the only thing that we're really trying to focus on. And the benefit of this whole thing, why the hell would you want to do like quick poses like this if you're not going to be worrying about anatomy and things like that? The appeal and the benefits of gesture drawing is that it trains your eye to spot the pose. It trains your eye to spot the energy of a drawing, and this combined with a real knowledge of anatomy and real knowledge of proportions and like really good understanding of figure drawing in general, when you combine those two, it gives you a lot more tools to do whatever you want. So by combining kind of like the energy and the gesture of gesture drawing, and then the actual realism of a figure drawing, when you combine those two, and then however you combine them, the ratio of one versus the other, this really is going to be your style eventually. This is what whatever you choose to do is going to end up being your style. So it's important. And so before I begin, quickly, the times here, the way I see this is very simple. So 30 seconds to 1 minute, you'll be able to do a stick figure, nothing more. And that's not, you shouldn't really be aiming to do anything more than that. Just a stick figure that really captures the movement of, or the pose of the person. Anything beyond that up until like 5 minutes, so 2 minutes, or anything more than 1 minute all the way up to 5 minutes, this would be where you can add a little bit more realism to the drawing. So you can add volumes. So the limbs can have some volume instead of being just one line. You can add maybe the eyes, and you can start to add a little bit more detail so that it actually looks like a person, instead of looking like a stick figure. And then anything more than that, anything past 5 minutes, then you enter, it's a different category, it's a different bracket. You're into the detail mode. So, past 5 minutes, you can start to add shadows maybe to define the volumes a little bit better. You can start to draw the fingers, because you'll have time for that. Draw a little bit of the face, the emotion, and you're able to get a lot more details in. But each of those kind of like those three different time brackets, if you want, they each serve a different purpose. So the shorter it is, the more you'll be able to focus on the pose, and the less you'll be able to focus on anything else. So it really trains your eye to spot the pose and put that down on paper as quickly as possible. And then beyond that, what it allows you to do is then you still do the same. So you still have to quickly put that pose down on the canvas, but it allows you to spend a little bit more time and introduce a little bit more of the proportions, the human proportions into it. And then beyond that, the longer period, this allows you to really focus more on anatomy, on volumes, on shading, and things like that. So, the longer you go, the more experience you have to be able to effectively do it. So that's why, we're going to start really, really quickly. We're not going to be worrying about anything more than 2 minutes for now. And what this exercise is all about is to grab the pose, put it down on paper, spot the pose, put it down on paper, put it down on canvas, and really focus on those early stages. Alright, so enough chit chat, let's get started with this. So I'm going to go ahead and get this timer ready. Alright. So again, we spot the line of action. So what I like to do is draw the head real quick, spot the line of action of the torso, and then draw the legs. And again, really quickly drawing the feet. They're not actual feet, they're just, kind of lines. But that is more than enough. Again, we're supposed to be drawing a stick figure for this. There we go. That's all there's time to do. Next up. Nice line for this one. Pelvis, the legs, the foot, and this one supporting the weights of everything. There you go. Another one. Another one with a really, really nice line of action. All right, so let's see what happened here. So as you can see, you really don't have time to do much. Like I said, a quick stick figure at most is what you'll be able to do. You're lucky if you're able to add a little bit of volume to everything. But like we've seen, first you start with a really quick line of action, and then you can add a second one. Generally speaking, you'll want another one, or in some cases, like in this case, there's a really nice line right here, and then there was another one for the foot that's holding all the weight. So with these, what's really important is to really try to make it look like your character is not floating, to make it look like there's actually some weight on here. So the position of the feet is really important. So always really pay attention to those. The first thing that I look at when I see this is, first you look at the overall shape. So you get a really nice line, from top to bottom, like this, going from his face all the way down to his leg. You get a really, really nice line of action this way. And then you look at the feet. So there's one foot here that's on the ground. This one is holding a lot of the weight, and this foot is a little bit further back than this one here. So this one, as you can see, the toes, if you trace a straight line right here, like a horizontal line, the toes here are a little bit more forward. So this foot here is a little bit closer, meaning that this leg, since it's a little bit closer to the camera, will appear a little bit longer. So those are all the things that you kind of need to pay attention to when you look at different poses. So let's see. So like this one here, like the position of the feet, they really make or break the pose. So if did I draw this one? No, I didn't. Let's see. So this one, for example. This one right here. You look at the position of the feet. Look at the line of action first, like I said. So a nice line of action this way, and then you have kind of like a curve this way, and then a curve the other way. So a curve like this, and then a curve like this. But when you're drawing the legs, again, always pay attention. You can see here, because it's a little bit darker, I always spend a little bit more time on the feet to make sure that they're situated properly and to give them kind of like the orientation that they should have. So the feet really help make or break a pose. So it's not wasted time when you spend a little bit extra time there. So I would say the feet for most poses are almost more important than the hands themselves and then the face. The face, if you have time, what I like to do is just trace a line where the eyes are, so that you know if the character is looking up or is she looking down. And this actually directs a lot of the pose too. So I didn't do it in the first two ones, but I started to do it later in some of the cases. So yeah, just a quick oval for the head, nothing major, and then kind of like just a line to indicate where the eyes are. Are they looking up? Are they looking on the side? Are they looking down? Just a line will do. So it's really quick, and it gives a lot more information. And then one more tip before we increase the time is always draw the limbs that are in front. So when you're drawing the legs, for example, or when you're drawing an arm, in this case, both arms are kind of at the same level. But if an arm is clearly in front, or if she's like looking sideways, like this, always draw the arm that you see closer to the camera first. Same thing with the legs. So if you see this leg here, clearly in front of the other leg, draw that leg first. And then after that, once you have the length of this leg, what you can do for the other leg is just kind of see where the foot lands in comparison to that leg. And you can tell here, so her toes, alright, it's about mid-calf, right? So this is where the toes should land on your drawing. So even if you're drawing just a really quick line to represent that leg, you know that the toes and the foot will not go any further than this. Always spend a little bit more time on the limbs that are closer to the camera, because if you get this one right, if you spend like 80% of your time, not 80% of your time, your total time, but let's say normally you would spend like 50% of the arm time on one arm and then 50% on the other arm. Don't do it this way. Instead, do it. Spot the arm that's in front, spot the limb that is in front, and spend 80% of your time for that limb.
and leave only 20% for the other arm or the other leg. So this way you'll make sure that the one that's in front is more accurate because you dedicated a little bit more time to it. And then when you get to do the other one, you can deduct a lot of things based on the first one that you created. In this case, for example, if you spend the extra time on that front arm, you'll know that, okay, if the shoulder is right here, and then if the elbow is right here, if the hand is right here, when is the time to draw the second arm? It makes things a lot easier because you know, okay, the shoulder for this one will start in relationship to this first one right about at the elbow. So you'll see, you know, the shoulder for the other one is going to be right about here, and then the elbow is going to be right in the middle of the right forearm. So, you know, it would be about right here. So I didn't place it correctly, but those are all things that you can deduct really easily if you do the first one correctly. And by just spending a little bit more time on one versus the other. Of course, that, like I said, it doesn't really apply if the character is like standing, you know, like facing you, where both arms are kind of equal. So in this case, you know, you spend 50% on one arm, 50% on the other one. But when there's a dominant one, whether it be a leg or an arm, in this case, you know, we spend more time on this leg than you would spend on the leg behind. So just quick tips to help you get correct proportions even when doing gesture drawing, where time is limited. All right, next up, we're going to go back and do 1 minute, so double the time, and we'll see what we're able to do and to achieve in that amount of time. right, so now with double the time, let's see what I was able to do. I'm gonna bring up. All right, so here you can see a little bit of the difference. You know what double the time lets you kind of achieve. So I'm using kind of like the same poses, so we're able to see the actual difference. So you know, for example, this one right here is this one. This one right here is this one. You know, just looking at this really quickly, you can see here the difference. So now, you know, the second batch, those are a little bit less, you know, stick figure and a little bit more volume. So already, you know, with a minute, you're able to do a lot more. And of course, you know, don't worry if in a minute you can only do this here. Obviously, you know, I have a little bit of experience drawing, so I'm able to do a little bit more than the beginners. You know, with the time that I have at the same time. And that's completely normal. The more you do it, the more you'll be able to do with the time that you're allowed. So a couple things here that I want to point out for this particular step. So at the 1 minute mark, so it's still very much gesture oriented. So you're just focusing on the pose here. I started to focus a little bit on the volumes, but again, like I said, 30 seconds to 1 minute is very much a stick figure phase. So it's only beyond 1 minute that you would start to really think about like anatomy and correct proportions and things like that. One detail here that I forgot to mention, you know, if you make a mistake or something like that, don't erase. Don't Control Z. Don't erase if you're drawing with a pencil. Just keep going. Draw over it. You know, don't waste time undoing something that you did. And this is also kind of the point of this exercise. So you go in and you try to build confidence. You try to just, you know, forget about the final result, because obviously this isn't the final result. It's an exercise. You know, it's something that you work on. It's like a muscle. It's like a workout. None of these look like final images. You know, none of these you'd put in your portfolio. It's just really, it's for yourself. So don't worry about the details. Don't worry about failing. I fail all the time doing this stuff. There's always a couple poses that are way off, that look completely ugly. That's completely normal. So the essential here is just to make sure that you get the pose down. So when you look at it quickly like this, you know, especially if you can zoom out a little bit, you should just really know what the pose is. You know, if it looks like something that you're not sure about, like this one here is a pretty bad one, and one that I kind of messed up. When you look at this, you really don't know what the pose is about. You don't know where the arms are. So this would be a bad one. But like a good one, you know, a good one that shows the gesture, like this one here, it's very simple. You know, there's not much to it, just a couple lines. But you see the pose, you see the gesture. This one too. And that's all that you're really after at this point. So this is it for gesture drawing. We're not going to go any longer. Of course, you can go longer if you want to, but we'll keep that for another class. What I wanted to achieve with gesture drawing is really train your eye at spotting the pose, spotting the gesture, spotting the energy of a figure. So here's your assignment. What I want you to do is spend 30 minutes, just 30 minutes, not that long, doing a combination of 30-second poses, 30 seconds, and 1 minute. So this should allow you to draw, you know, about 15 to 20 different poses, which is a good amount. And I want you to do this every day, starting now, and you'll see, you know, if you can stick to it. Of course, you know, if you can't spend that 30 minutes, not that big of a deal. But if you do spend it, or even if you want to go longer, if you want to do an hour, that's even better. You'll progress twice as fast. What this will do is, the more that you do, obviously, the better you'll get, the faster you'll get, the more you'll be able to draw with every session, with every image. And it's one of those things, like the first couple of days, it won't seem like you're progressing much. But if you keep doing this for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like a month, you'll see huge results. And it's one of those things where it just creeps up on you, and then you look back at what you used to do like 30 days prior, and then what you're able to do, you know, today, and it's amazing the amount of of knowledge, the amount of skills that you can acquire in such a short period of time if you just stick to it. And again, it's 30 minutes total per day. It's not much at all. It's, it's the time it takes you to watch an episode of something, like a TV show or something. So anybody can probably find that time in their day, and it's really, really well spent. If this is too fast, if 30 seconds for you is just like, I can't even draw a single line with 30 seconds, or if you're like really struggling with a tablet or something like that, you can do those on the pencil. There's no real reason to do those on a computer if you're not comfortable with that. You really have to be comfortable with the medium that you're using for this. So whether it be it can be paint, it can be charcoal, whatever you want. Just make sure that the medium that you're using is not going against you. You're not struggling with the actual medium, because you really don't have time to think about that. So whatever media that you choose one that you're comfortable with. And if those are really too quick for you, you can do 1 minute and 2 minutes instead. I would never go above 2 minutes for gesture drawing. So anything beyond that, we're entering a different field, like I talked about. It's a different bracket. You're observing different things at that point, and this is not the purpose of this. All right, and the last thing I would recommend is to narrow down your selection of photos to something like 30, 20 to 30 max. This way, whenever you do a session every day, there's going to be kind of like a couple of drawings that are going to be the same. So you'll be able to see the evolution over time. And of course, keep all of those. Store them, name them like day 1, day 2, day 3. Place them all on like one big sheet of paper like this, or one big canvas, and then save them all so that after like 2 weeks, after a month, you can look back and see the progress, see the same kind of poses that keep coming back, and see how you evolved over time. And just like working out, where you should always take photos, of your progress to see where you start, to see some progress. This is really, really motivating when you see how much progress you're making, after all this work. And if you're going to draw a character, if you have an idea for a character, like something cool, not related to figure drawing whatsoever, and you're like in the mood of drawing, do a quick session, maybe like just 10 minutes, 5 minutes, something like this. Do a couple poses to warm you up. It really, really helps. It activates the brain. It gets you in the mood. It gets you thinking it gets you into this creative mindset. And it's really good to warm up with this, just like it's good to warm up like running before workout. So this is going to be it for gesture drawing. Have fun, and I'll talk to you soon.